Have you ever felt like your brain is a web browser with just like 50 tabs open all at once?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
Right. And to make matters worse, there's music playing from one of them, but no matter how frantically you click around, you absolutely cannot figure out which tab it's coming from.
Yes. You're just sitting there, staring at the screen, completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of open information.
Exactly. You're just paralyzed by it. And usually, we just write this off as being stressed or having an overactive mind, like, oh, I just need a vacation.
Right, but it's deeper than just everyday stress.
It is, because ancient Buddhist psychology actually has a highly specific, really rigorous diagnosis for this exact feeling. So in our deep dive today, we are zeroing in on a psychological profile known as Vitakka-Carita.
Which is such a fascinating framework to explore.
It really is. And we're drawing exclusively on an incredible breakdown of this concept from chapter 6 of a book written by Reverend Thalangalle Ratana Thero. We are going to map out exactly how this mental machinery works and, more importantly, how you can stop it from overheating.
Because that overheating is a real issue. Vitakka-Carita is often translated as the speculative or discursive temperament. And I want to set the stakes right up front here. The goal isn't to hand you a permanent label or, put you in some psychological box.
Yeah, it's not a personality test.
Exactly. It's about mapping your default mental habits. You have to know the actual terrain of your own mind before you can navigate it.
Because if you don't know the terrain, you're just wandering blind.
Right. And if your default state is perpetual mental motion, a generic one-size-fits-all approach to relaxation is just going to completely fail you.
Okay, so let's establish what this terrain actually looks like under the microscope. What makes a Vitakka-Carita fundamentally different from just a standard busy person?
Well, it really comes down to the mechanics of the attention span. Let's look at the Pali word itself. Vitakka translates to initial thought, or application of the mind, or discursive thinking.
Okay.
So a Vitakka-Carita is someone whose mind is habitually, almost compulsively, honestly occupied with thinking. The mind just wanders from one concept to another with such rapid velocity that it really struggles to remain steadily focused on a single object.
So it's kind of like being an eternal armchair quarterback of your own life.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You know what I mean? You're constantly strategizing and rerunning past plays and predicting future ones, but you struggle to just stand still on the actual field.
Precisely. The mental apparatus is stuck in this processing mode, rather than just a receiving mode. And this leads to a really fascinating comparison in the Visuddhimagga, which is an ancient commentary text mentioned in our source material.
Oh, what do they compare it to?
They explicitly link the Vitakka-Carita, the speculative thinker, with something called the Moha-Carita, which translates to the deluded temperament.
Wait, hold on. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Being a deep thinker, someone who constantly analyzes and plans, that's being grouped in with being deluded because usually, we praise problem solving and intellectual curiosity.
Right. Society loves an analytical mind.
Exactly. It feels a bit harsh or maybe backward to say that someone who is highly analytical is actually suffering from a form of delusion. Isn't thinking supposed to be a good thing?
I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive until you look at the underlying mechanism. Why are they grouped together? Because both of these minds fundamentally lack stability and clarity. That is the shared denominator.
Okay, lack of clarity.
Yes. But there's a very crucial difference in why they lack that clarity.
So what's the mechanical difference between the two then?
For the Moha-Carita, the deluded temperament, the confusion arises from ignorance and dullness. It is a very heavy, foggy state of mind. But for the Vitakka-Carita, the confusion comes from an absolute traffic jam of ideas.
Oh, wow. So it's not dullness at all.
No, it's hyperactivity. The mind is so continually occupied with internal arguments and conceptual frameworks and endless chatter that actual objective clarity is just completely lost in the noise.
I see. So it's sort of the difference between not being able to see because you are standing in a pitch black room versus not being able to see because someone is shining a high-intensity strobe light directly into your eyes.
Yes, exactly.
Both of those situations leave you functionally blind to your surroundings, but for entirely opposite reasons.
That is exactly it. The strobe light effect paralyzes your visual processing system through overstimulation, just as the Vitakka mind paralyzes the decision-making system through overanalysis.
That is so interesting.
And because the mind is so active, the text warns that people with this temperament fall into a very specific trap. They routinely mistake excessive thinking for wisdom.
Oh, that is a huge trap. That makes a lot of sense, though, because if you are constantly debating ideas in your head, you feel productive.
Right, you feel like you're doing something.
You feel intellectually engaged. And like we said, society generally rewards the quick-witted, so you just assume this internal friction is a sign of intelligence.
But it's really just attrition.
Right. So if excessive thinking isn't necessarily wisdom, how do we know when we've crossed the line? How do we, as listeners, recognize when this mental strobe light is actually blinding us?
Well, the source material provides a really helpful diagnostic approach, starting with external behaviors. Because if your internal CPU is running at maximum capacity, analyzing 50 ideas at once, it invariably leaks into your physical reality.
So what does that look like from the outside?
You'll see traits like being overly talkative, highly sociable, and intensely curious. But there's a shadow side to this.
Which is?
Restlessness and posture, being easily distracted by trivial things happening around you, and notoriously leaving tasks unfinished.
Man, the unfinished tasks thing makes total sense. If the mind is just addicted to the friction of new ideas, the actual execution phase of a project is going to feel incredibly boring.
Because the novelty wears off.
Exactly. The next idea is suddenly much more stimulating than the current reality of doing the hard work.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And to help you figure out if this is actually your dominant habit, the material provides a set of 20 self-assessment questions.
20 questions. That's thorough.
It is. And they are laser-focused on identifying this discursive tendency. For instance, they ask, do you find it difficult to remain silent for long periods?
Oh, I know a lot of people who would say yes to that.
Or do you often replay past conversations in your mind?
The classic shower argument.
Yes, the shower argument. And fundamentally, the biggest question is, do you feel mentally exhausted because your mind is always active?
Mental exhaustion. Yeah, that is the real penalty here. It isn't just a quirky personality trait. Operating in a constant state of hyperarousal just burns you out.
And the mechanism behind that exhaustion is a really important concept mentioned in the text called papanyaka.
Papanyaka. How does that translate?
It translates to mental proliferation.
Mental proliferation.
Yeah, it's the innate tendency of the discursive mind to take a single, very simple data point and endlessly spin out these complex, towering architectures of stories, concepts, and judgments.
Like a snowball effect.
Exactly. It's a snowball effect, where one thought triggers 10, and those 10 trigger 100.
So let me try to map this to a real-world scenario. Is Papanyaka like, okay, let's say I send an email to a colleague and they don't reply for 2 hours.
Okay, a very common scenario.
Right, so the raw data point is just no reply.
Yeah.
But suddenly my brain is like, oh, I used the wrong tone. They are definitely offended. They are probably talking to my manager about it right now. And by Friday, I'm going to be looking for a new job.
Yes.
Is that Papanyaka?
That is a textbook example of papanyaka. The mind has taken a totally neutral event, an unanswered email, and built a complete fictional crisis around it to simulate some sense of control.
Wow.
Because the brain is fundamentally a prediction engine trying to keep you safe. But in a modern environment, it ends up predicting these catastrophic social threats that just don't exist. You spend immense energy fighting shadows.
Which actually brings up a really interesting paradox I noticed in one of those self-assessment questions.
Well, which one?
It asks, do you make many plans but struggle to put them into action?
Yes, question number 13.
Right. There's this massive irony where, for the speculative temperament, the act of planning actually becomes a substitute for doing.
Absolutely. Why do you think the brain makes that substitution?
It feels like, well, the brain can't tell the difference between the satisfaction of building the plan and the satisfaction of executing it.
That's a great point.
Making a hyper-detailed plan provides this hit of dopamine, a feeling of resolution. The mind prefers the safety and the perfection of the abstract idea over the messy, unpredictable reality of actually doing the work.
Because reality is unpredictable.
Right. So it just stops at the planning phase and calls it a day.
That is a brilliant breakdown of the dopaminergic feedback loop at play here. The mental event completely replaces the physical action. So this raises the ultimate question for our listeners.
Which is how to fix it.
Exactly. If your natural state is a chaotic traffic jam of ideas and your brain is actively rewarding you for overthinking, how do you clear the road?
Right. What is the actual prescription here? Because telling an overthinker to just relax is notoriously useless. It might actually make them more stressed.
Oh, it definitely makes them more stressed. So the material points to very specific, tailored meditation practices. The primary tool, the absolute best intervention for this temperament, is anapanasati, which is mindfulness of breathing.
Okay, let's be realistic here. Telling someone whose brain is moving a million miles an hour to just watch their breath is usually a recipe for frustration, or even like a mild panic attack.
It can feel very jarring, yes.
Because if I try that, I don't relax. I just start analyzing my lung capacity or worrying if I'm breathing symmetrically or wondering if I'm doing it right. So why is the breath the recommended antidote for this specific mindset?
Because the breath is a completely neutral, non-conceptual anchor.
Meaning it doesn't give the brain anything to chew on.
Exactly. If you give a speculative mind a complex philosophical puzzle to focus on, it will eagerly devour it and spin up more papanya. But the breath is always available, and it forces you to anchor to a physical, present-moment reality.
But what about the anxiety of trying to do it right?
Well, you highlight the exact hurdle most people face, the attempt to control or analyze the breath.
So how do we engage with the breath without triggering that analytical engine?
The key is in the precise instruction given in the text. Do not control the breathing. Just know each inhalation and exhalation. And when thoughts inevitably arise, because they absolutely will, you do not fight them.
No fighting.
No fighting, and you do not analyze why you had them. You simply recognize the mental event, gently label it with a phrase like thinking, thinking, and return to the breath.
So it's sort of like training a puppy.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, you don't yell at the puppy for wandering off the mat, right? You just patiently pick it up and put it back on the mat over and over again without getting frustrated.
That is an excellent way to think about it. You are breaking the engagement loop. Over time, that patient repetition develops concentration, what is known as samadhi, and the internal noise naturally quiets down.
But let's look at the extreme cases. Sometimes the mind is so highly agitated that simply observing the breath feels entirely impossible. Like the puppy is just sprinting around the room and won't be caught. What alternative tools does the framework offer for that high-level restlessness?
When the mind is exceptionally scattered, the text recommends modifying the practice by introducing counting.
Counting the breaths.
Yes, you count each exhalation sequentially from 1 to 10. And if you lose your place because you got distracted, you don't get angry. You simply restart from 1.
I can see how that works mechanically. It's essentially occupying a portion of the brain's working memory, right?
That's exactly what it's doing.
It gives the analytical mind a linear, repetitive task to chew on, which uses up just enough cognitive bandwidth, like just enough RAM, that it can't simultaneously spin up complex stories and anxieties.
Precisely. It gathers the scattered mind by constraining it. And there's another powerful alternative provided for when sitting still feels like being in a pressure cooker.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Kakama, or walking meditation.
Yes, walking meditation.
I was really hoping we would bring this up because for an overthinker, sitting cross-legged can sometimes just completely amplify the physical restlessness. How does walking meditation change the dynamic?
It grounds abstract concepts into undeniable physical reality. You are translating mental friction into deliberate kinetic movement.
That makes so much sense.
As you walk back and forth on a set path, you actively reflect on the physical sensations. You note to yourself, lifting, moving, placing.
So you are forcing the CPU to acknowledge the hardware. You are trading all those abstract fears about tomorrow for the undeniable physical reality of your foot hitting the floor right now.
Exactly. And this leads to a broader, highly effective pivot in the practice, which is mindfulness of thinking itself.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, instead of constantly trying to escape your thoughts to return to the breath, you change how you interface with the thoughts.
Ah.
Normally, when a thought arises, we instantly identify with it. We jump on it and ride it to its final destination. But mindfulness of thinking asks you to step back into an observational role.
So how do you do that in practice?
You categorize the thought objectively. You say, planning is happening, or judging is arising, remembering is occurring.
Notice the phrasing there, listeners. It's not, I am worrying, it's worrying is happening. That completely shifts the relationship.
It creates a critical distance. You acknowledge the thought as a passing atmospheric condition, rather than a definitive crisis that demands your immediate participation.
Okay, so meditation, whether it's breathing, counting, or walking, that serves as the emergency brake. It stops the car from speeding.
Right.
But how do we actually rebuild the engine so it stops redlining in the first place? How do we rewire our default responses when we are off the meditation cushion and just, living our daily lives?
The source material provides a series of reflection statements for this exact purpose. And the author is very careful to clarify that these are not meant to be mystical mantras or magic words that instantly erase your thoughts.
Right, they aren't spells.
No. They are practical, cognitive reminders designed to gently steer the ship when you realize you've drifted back into Papanyaka.
They are essentially pattern interrupts. And there is one reflection here that sounds so deceptively simple, but for an overthinker, it is totally subversive.
Which one stood out to you?
The phrase, "not every thought is true."
Oh, that is a radical realization for a Vitakka-Carita.
It really is, because the discursive mind defaults to treating every thought as urgent, infallible data.
Exactly. It operates on the assumption that because the brain generated the thought, it must be accurate and it must be dealt with immediately.
It's like treating a faulty smoke detector like it's a guaranteed fire. Recognizing that your mind can and routinely does produce false alarms removes an enormous amount of the urgency you feel throughout the day.
It really takes the pressure off. And this leads to the most profound reflection provided for this temperament, which is a thought is only a mental event.
Let's dig deeply into the semantic difference there. Why is that specific phrasing so powerful for someone who overanalyzes?
Because it targets the core illusion of the speculative temperament, which is identification.
Identification, meaning how we attach to the thought.
Yes, we say, I am angry or I am anxious. We fuse our entire identity with the temporary chemical and electrical signals in our brain.
Wow, yeah, we really do.
But deeply reflecting on the fact that a thought is only a mental event teaches you to see thoughts as conditioned and impermanent. They arise due to certain stimuli, they stay for a brief moment, and if you do not feed them with additional narrative attention, they pass away.
It de-identifies you from the chaos. It's the difference between believing you are the thunderstorm versus being the sky watching the storm roll through. The lightning is still flashing, but you aren't being struck by it.
That is a beautiful way to phrase it. Now, to round out the toolkit, the text does briefly note that as practitioners advance, there are other traditional recommendations for this temperament.
Oh, like what?
For instance, Buddha-nusati, which is the recollection of the Buddha.
How does that fit into managing an overactive mind?
Well, it is recommended for times when the mind is highly scattered, but receptive to a devotional or inspiring focus.
I see.
A neutral anchor, like the breath, might not be enough to capture the mind's interest. So providing an uplifting, noble subject gives all that intellectual energy a productive direction.
So if the mind absolutely refuses to stop chewing on something, you just give it something high quality and inspiring to chew on rather than letting it chew on your insecurities.
Exactly. Give it a better job to do. And for very experienced practitioners aiming for strong, unwavering concentration, the text mentions Kasiya meditation.
Kasiya meditation.
Yes, under proper guidance, of course. This involves focusing intently on a specific external visual object, like a colored disc or an element like water.
Wait, what's the mechanism behind that? Why does staring at a visual object stabilize a discursive mind?
Think about what the speculative mind does all day. It constantly generates internal imagery, hypothetical scenarios, and visual memories. It is an exhausting rendering process.
Right, the brain is rendering all these fake realities.
Exactly. So by locking the visual cortex onto a single external static object, you essentially pie up the brain's rendering engine.
Oh, wow.
It physically cannot overlay its own complex internal stories because the bandwidth is completely filled by the act of observing this simple, unwavering object. The internal chatter just starves from a lack of processing power.
That is utterly fascinating. It's like a physiological hack to quiet a psychological loop.
It really is.
So, synthesizing all of this, if you, listening right now, recognize your own mind in the description of a Vitakka-Carita, you are managing a brain that is an incredible, high-powered engine of curiosity, pattern recognition, and analysis. That engine is a gift.
A huge gift.
But without the breaks of mindfulness, without the grounding of breath awareness, counting, or walking, that engine just runs hot until it damages itself. It leads to burnout, scattered focus, and an inability to simply exist in the present moment without narrating it.
It is entirely about reclaiming your agency, recognizing that you do not need to follow every thought to its conclusion. You can observe the mind's endless activity without becoming enslaved by it.
Which leaves us with a final thought I really want you, the listener, to mull over as you close out your day. We talked heavily about labeling thoughts, stepping back and saying, this anxiety is just a mental event. This distraction is not mine.
And that raises a really profound question about the fundamental nature of our own minds.
What's the question?
If you can observe your thoughts as just passing luggage on a conveyor belt, if you can look at a deeply held worry or a complex idea and truly say, this is not me, this is just a temporary thought, then who or what is the quiet observer left behind when the thinking finally stops?
A huge thank you to you for joining us on this deep dive. I hope this exploration helps you close out a few of those open browser tabs in your brain today and find a bit of quiet. Next time, we will be turning our attention to focus on the very next character temperament detailed in this ancient psychological framework. Until then, keep observing.